Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 222 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. The FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions, your one-stop shop for all things FCPA compliance related. Today I conclude my three-part May the Podcast Be With You series with my good friend and colleague Jay Rosen of Merrill Brink Translations. In this episode, we take a look at episode 6 of the original trilogy, Star Wars trilogy, The Return of the Jedi. We unpack it from a cinematic standpoint, some of our favorite ideas and episodes, and tie it into compliance and translations in your compliance program.
Hello,
the episode
everyone.
comes in
Tom
just
Fox,
over 20 minutes.
Welcome back to our special Return of the Podcast episodes. Back with Jay Rosen, and this, of course, is the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. This is our third of three podcasts we're doing in honor of the new Star Wars movie. We are focusing on the first three movies. The first one, of course, was A New Hope, then The Empire Strikes Back, and now we're to The Return of the Jedi. So, Jay, welcome back, and I hope that you got some good Hollywood insider insights for us from this movie.
Sure. I don't know if they're as good as the other stuff we spoke about in the other two podcasts. At this point, Lucas is well established. He needs to feed the beast, so to speak, and come up with another movie. Once again, he passes on the writing and the directing duties. And at this point, Lucas has collected enough chips, both in terms of Hollywood political cachet and in terms of monetary stuff, to start working on other passions of his. And those things range from an audio system called THX to building the Skywalker Ranch to having his special effects company. So this is really, once again, where Lucas has walled himself off from Hollywood, up in wine country, doing his own thing. And one little irony here is he used to have a small little division called Pixar, which he did not really see as profitable in fitting into the Lucas range of products. So it was sold to Steve Jobs. And now everyone's back together again because Pixar is one of the flagship brands of the Walt Disney Company, as is Lucasfilm. So somewhere in between there happened Howard the Duck, but that's really been relegated to stories of the past. So, this is where Lucas is bringing a logical conclusion to the trilogy. I think at this point, we did not have an idea of the prequels or the sequels, so everyone was looking for things to be wrapped up and to find out who the man behind the black mask is and what are the exact relationships between Luke, Leia, and Han. And I think this episode goes a very long way in answering all those questions and tying up the trilogy at that point.
I can recall an early interview I heard with Lucas where he actually had planned out 9 episodes of this series and an entire arc. And we saw the prequel, or the 1, 2, and 3 come out after The Return of the Jedi. And we start next week on December 18th with the final 3 episodes. So he's certainly had this in mind for quite a while. And to be able not only to have the resources, but just the will and chutzpah to put together your vision and put it out there on the big screen, I think is something that certainly should be kudos to Mr. Lucas for doing that. Although, as you have noted several times, he has gotten extraordinarily wealthy in bringing this to us. But that's another discussion for perhaps another day, because The Return of the Jedi certainly stands on its own 2 feet. Many people felt it was a little too cuddly and squishy with the Ewoks, but upon sort of reviewing and rewatching that film for this podcast, I was struck that there's a lot going on in Ewok society and culture that I had not really picked up on before. And he has created an entire clan, obviously, of Ewoks. But if you look closely, there's a very interesting both structure yet inherent democracy with little d in the Ewok village. So I was very intrigued to see that. Of course, took a lot of viewings to get me there. But my favorite scene, Jay, in this movie was I'm not sure if you call it a racer or what exactly type of equipment it was. It was perhaps a precursor to a motorcycle, but when they flew through the forest, chasing Luke and Leia were chasing the stormtroopers above, just off the forest floor, and I thought that was an incredible special effect. And frankly, I could watch that day in and day out for many, many more times and still find something new and fresh about it, and be amazed with the technical competence that they put that together. You mentioned some of the Lucas Enterprises and really what the Star Wars franchise spun off. Obviously, the toys, dolls, images, etc. But THX, the sound system, Industrial Light and Magic, their special effects system that some company, I think you called it Pixar, I'm not quite sure, you mentioned in passing. But Lucas actually created an entire new, not new industry or new superstructure, but a new way to do movies with technology that I think many compliance practitioners can think about and really use as a way to further their compliance programs as well. So with that lead in, what I'd like to really explore on this podcast, if we could, Jay, is we talked about putting your compliance team together. You told us about putting your translation team together. We talked about what do you do when it all hits the fan? How do you have a protocol in place? What do you do when you get that call in the middle of the night from the translations perspective? But now we're perhaps, we have a mature compliance program. And I don't want to say it's humming along, but it's moving along. You've been able to get it into the fabric of your company. But the Department of Justice has been very, very clear that your compliance program is not static but dynamic. And it has to grow. It has to breathe. It has to expand. It has to help continue to evaluate, or as Roy Snell would say, find, fix, and remediate any problems that come up. So perhaps if we could explore what, from the translations perspective, would you suggest for a company that has a mature compliance program? Are there any, if not remedial steps that they could do on an annual or an ongoing basis to help keep the program as a current best practices program from the compliance perspective?
Yeah, great question, Tom. I think where I would start, directing my efforts, and we spoke about this on past calls, is one of the things that is either specifically referred to in the guidance or the idea in some of the declinations that have come out recently is that your compliance program is not one and done. There is always room for continuous improvement and continuous testing. And one of the things that we try to do differently at Merrill Brink is that we are just not going to take your code of conduct, translate it, and send it out into the vacuum and say we're done. And one of the things we kind of stress with our clients is that you need to have in-country translation ambassadors. And not only do we say it might be a good idea, but we strongly suggest to our clients that they have somebody in country read the work that we've done in the translations of the policies and the procedures and code of conduct and give it a read from a perspective of, not just does it sound great and does it flow great, but are there specific terms of art and things that mean one thing within company A that mean something different to the outside the world? And then also, are there specific terms within their ethics and compliance program that may not translate into foreign language, and the only way that you can address those things is by English. So after we do that process, we get the feedback from the in-country ambassadors, and then we take those comments which are valid and we update the code of conduct. So one thing is to make sure that the code resonates in the different countries where you're preparing it for. But the other thing that this program really does is starts to give you local buy-in. So if you're asking the country for their opinion, they feel good. Then furthermore, if you get out onto the shop and on the front line, that's another way to do it. And then once you've done all the heavy lifting and you've translated your code of conduct and your policies and procedures, you should be refreshing them anywhere from 18 to 24 months, depending on the new anti-corruption developments. Within the last 5 years, we've seen a big refresh happen, driven by the UK Bribery Act, and recently people are refreshing and taking a look now at the Brazilian Clean Company Act. So it's a combination of there may be heavy lifting if you don't have a program in place, but once you've got the building blocks there and you've built up something called translation memory, this means that when you update your code in the future, 80 to 90% of that document will stay the same, but maybe 10 to 20% will change. You go back into your translation memory, and a lot of those words you've already translated, so you can do them at 1/8 or 1/9 of the cost than it would be for a new word. So to kind of tie it all back into the technology that Lucas was building, I think one thing that you have the ability to do now is within your company, you have people that specialize on certain things, and with using specialist companies, language solutions providers who have a specialty in ethics and compliance and doing investigations, if you can leverage them, you're going to get consistent results, you're going to save money, and you're going to ultimately be able to certify your work product. So God forbid you translated something wrong, it would not be on somebody within the company, but the LSP would be the entity that is certifying what your code of conduct means. So above all, if you don't buy the arguments of being efficient or saving money or going to a qualified resource, at the end of the day, you have risk mitigation, which I think a lot of what we're trying to do here is to insulate the company and put it in the best position to find bad actors.
And Jay, really what I'd like to focus on is three concepts to help a company maintain a best practices program. So obviously auditing is an important part of your program going forward, and you should audit on a 2 or 3 year basis. But in between the audit, there's a lot of things you can do that are cost effective, yet can help to identify any weaknesses in your program and move to a more aggressive approach if something might pop up. So auditing, of course, is a deep dive, but a narrow focus. Conversely, transaction monitoring is a very shallow dive, but you're taking up a huge amount of information. So if you have typically that's a technological based solution where you crunch a large amount of data, and you come up with something that if it's below or above a range you set, gives you an opportunity to review it on a little bit deeper dive basis. But those two in conjunction with each other can provide you with a pretty good way to assess where you are. Obviously, the Department of Justice talks about risk assessment, risk-based approach to anything you do in compliance. And I'm really not going to focus on risk assessment, but you can and should do a risk assessment. But beyond a risk assessment, you can test. I had one time a CPA asked me if I thought I was competent to do an audit. I said, absolutely not. I'm not a CPA. I don't understand that. I'm not a numbers guy. I don't understand the protocol. But what I am competent to do is test. And simply that means is looking at some documents to see if it's followed your protocol. So why don't you go take your top 3 to 5 third parties and see if you have a business justification form, if you have a questionnaire, if you've done due diligence, if there's a report on the due diligence. Have you evaluated that due diligence and the appropriate compliance terms and conditions in place? Are there certifications going forward after the contract was signed on an annual basis that they've not violated the FCPA? Are there certifications they've taken FCPA training? You can test and see if you have those documents in the file so that the paper part of the program is created. You can take a deeper dive to see if they've actually understood the training and if there are any problems in the billing, certainly through the audit function. But you can certainly test. You can test in gifts and entertainment. You can test in charitable contributions. You can test your third parties. You can test your travel. Really any of those. And that's something that you could do on a cost-effective basis. Think about how much it would cost, you, Jay, to take a look at the contracts that Merrill might have in place. So I advocate that there's a large number of tools that a company can use to move forward, to continue to have their program evolve as new risks occur, whether those are operational/business risks, whether those are new legal risks, whether that you've articulated in the form of new anti-corruption laws across the globe, whether there's increased enforcement in a country like China. Wide variety of risks change over time. And the department has made it clear. I can think it was 2009, I heard Lanny Brewer say that your program has to be dynamic, it must be growing, and it must be alive. So in many ways, when this movie ended, we were at the end of a cycle. There were the prequels coming that I think you and I both do not think are as good as these 3. Perhaps it's our age. Perhaps it's because these are the first 3 that we saw. My daughter has a different view, being a millennial, as to what the first 3 are and what the best 3 are. But as we've moved to this point, and we're ready now for episode 7 of Star Wars, which premieres next week, were there any scenes or lines that have stayed with you that you've used, for the past 20 plus years? Anything from this movie that really sticks out you could share with us?
I don't know if it's specifically a line, but I think it's more that image when Darth Vader takes off his mask and to look at Luke, and suddenly at that one point, this evil of Darth Vader is really humanized, and I think that's a real turning point for the series there, because there's such a mythical bond between a father and a son, and a lot of times the son, or I wouldn't even say father and son, let's say a child and a parent, and children either want to be like their parents or they want to be absolutely the other direction. So this really, it's the mother and child reunion here, or whatever you want to call it. But now Luke is like literally looking into the abyss, and suddenly he's got to figure out, well, what's all this rage, and what are these things that I'm feeling, and where do they come from? And the answer is they come from Anakin, who's his father. And I think I am keenly interested in seeing what J.J. Abrams and all the fellow collaborators have to bring us now into the future, into episode 7.
Well, my favorite line is not so dramatic and not so all-encompassing, but I have it's stuck with me for, 20 plus years, 30 plus years, and it's the following. C-3PO, when asked to speak to the Ewoks on the forest planet of Endor from the position of a god, he said, "Sir, it's against my programming to impersonate a deity." And I don't know why that one was so funny at the time, but it's always struck with me. And so I often say it's against my programming to impersonate a deity. So I'm not a god. I'm not a god with a little g. I may be a guru, but I'm not a deity. I try to remember that going forward. So, Jay, with that, this series has been a ton of fun. I hope that you will introduce your daughters to the next generation of Star Wars movies with the same verve that we were introduced. I guess they're a little bit younger than when we first saw the first three, but it's a magical experience, whether you're 7 or 77, probably. So I look forward to perhaps even doing a podcast on episode 7 when it comes out.
That would be great. Once again, Tom, it's always fun to talk to you and with you. And, I like to give just kudos to you from the ethics and compliance community. You are a tireless worker out there. And I think what you do by taking references from pop culture and horror films and history and just really finding an opportunity for us to always see opportunities to, integrate ethics and compliance not only into our business DNA, but also into our daily existence. So on behalf of the ethics and compliance community, I thank you for your diligence, your tireless efforts, and the forums that you've created for us.
Well, thanks a lot, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
All right. Take care, Tom. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. These 3 episodes that Jay and I did this week were a ton of fun for both of us. It was helped by the number of comments we received, other folks who indicated they really liked these as well. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you had some fun, and I hope you learned something. If you have any questions that you would like addressed in my upcoming mailbag episode, please email them to me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. I look forward to visiting with you again. And if you enjoyed this podcast on iTunes, I would ask if you could go to iTunes and rate it. Thank you very much, and I hope you will come back and visit us again.